Wagner Group was supposed to be Russia's most flexible and deniable force abroad, a shadow army operating where official troops could not. However, something catastrophic has just shattered that illusion, and tens of thousands of Wagner fighters across Africa are now facing a reality they were never prepared for. The very network that once made them powerful is collapsing from within, leaving as many as 150,000 personnel exposed, isolated, and increasingly stranded across some of the most unstable regions on Earth. What was designed to be a global projection tool has suddenly turned into a logistical nightmare of unprecedented scale. The images you are about to see on your screens reveal fragments of this unfolding crisis. What you see is not a coordinated withdrawal or a planned redeployment. The footage shows abandoned convoys in the Sahel, airstrips with grounded transport aircraft, and Wagner fighters attempting to secure supply depots with dwindling resources. But that is not the most shocking detail. There are two core disruptions that triggered this collapse, and together they explain why Wagner's entire African network is now on the brink. We will break those down in the coming minutes. On February 28, 2026, a series of coordinated disruptions began affecting Wagner-linked logistics routes across Mali, the Central African Republic, and Sudan. According to reports from the Institute for the Study of War and corroborated by French and U.S. intelligence assessments, at least 6 major supply corridors were simultaneously cut off within a 96-hour window. These corridors were not minor pathways. They were the primary lifelines through which ammunition, fuel, spare parts, and personnel rotations were maintained. Satellite imagery analyzed by CSIS indicates that key airfields in Bamako, Bangui, and Port Sudan experienced sudden halts in cargo operations. Transport aircraft, including Il-76 and An-124 platforms, were either grounded or redirected. At the same time, maritime shipments linked to Russian logistics networks encountered delays due to increased scrutiny and interdiction measures in the Mediterranean and Red Sea. The timing of these disruptions was not coincidental. It was synchronized. To understand the magnitude of this event, it is necessary to examine how Wagner operates in Africa. Unlike conventional armies, Wagner relies on a hybrid logistics model combining state support, private contracts, and local resource extraction. In Mali, Wagner secures mining operations in exchange for protection services. In the Central African Republic, it controls key gold and diamond assets. In Sudan, it has historically leveraged port access and paramilitary alliances to sustain its operations. This model is highly efficient when functioning correctly. It allows Wagner to operate with a degree of independence unmatched by traditional military forces, but it also creates a critical vulnerability. The entire system depends on continuous movement of resources across vast distances, often through politically unstable regions. When these flows are disrupted, the system does not degrade gradually. It collapses rapidly. The first major factor behind the current crisis is the fragmentation of Wagner's command structure following internal restructuring within Russia's security apparatus. After the events of 2023 and subsequent integration efforts, Wagner's leadership was partially absorbed into the Russian Ministry of Defense and the GRU. However, this integration was never fully completed. Instead, it created overlapping chains of command, conflicting directives, and unclear lines of authority. According to leaked communications cited by European intelligence sources, Wagner units in Africa began receiving contradictory orders in early 2026. Some were instructed to consolidate positions, others were told to expand operations, and in several cases, units reported complete communication silence from Central Command. This breakdown in coordination meant that when the logistical disruptions began, there was no unified response. The second factor is external pressure. Over the past year, Western and regional actors have intensified efforts to counter Wagner's influence in Africa. This includes targeted sanctions, intelligence sharing agreements, and direct support to local forces opposing Wagner-backed regimes. In the Sahel, joint operations between regional militaries and Western advisors have increasingly focused on disrupting supply lines rather than engaging Wagner forces directly. This strategy appears to have reached a critical point in late February. By targeting logistics instead of personnel, these operations effectively neutralized Wagner's operational capability without requiring large-scale confrontations. The result is what military analysts describe as logistical strangulation. Units remain intact, but they are unable to function. The strategic implications of this are profound. Wagner's presence in Africa has been a cornerstone of Russia's global influence strategy. It provides access to resources, geopolitical leverage, and a means of bypassing international constraints. If Wagner's network collapses, Russia loses not just a military asset, but a critical component of its foreign policy. But the situation on the ground is even more immediate. Without reliable supply lines, Wagner units are facing shortages of fuel, ammunition, and basic provisions. In some areas, reports indicate that fighters have begun rationing food and scavenging local resources. This creates tension with local populations, increasing the risk of clashes and further destabilization. In Mali, for example, local sources report that Wagner patrols have reduced their operational range by nearly 40% due to fuel constraints. In the Central African Republic, several outposts have reportedly been abandoned entirely. And in Sudan, ongoing conflict has further complicated efforts to maintain any form of logistical continuity. This brings us to the geopolitical context. Africa has become a key arena for great power competition, with Russia, China, and Western nations all seeking influence. Wagner has been Russia's primary tool in this competition, offering security assistance in exchange for strategic advantages. But if Wagner is weakened or forced to withdraw, a power vacuum emerges. Western nations may attempt to reassert influence through diplomatic and economic channels. China may expand its already significant presence through infrastructure and investment projects. Regional powers may seek to assert greater control over their own security environments. The outcome is uncertain, but the balance is shifting. The psychological dimension of this crisis is equally significant. Wagner fighters are not conventional soldiers. Many are veterans of previous conflicts, motivated by financial incentives and a sense of autonomy. Being stranded in hostile environments without clear support undermines that foundation. Intercepted communications and field reports suggest growing frustration among personnel. Some units have reportedly attempted to negotiate directly with local authorities for supplies. Others have considered withdrawing independently, without waiting for orders. These behaviors indicate a breakdown in discipline and cohesion. For local populations, the presence of stranded Wagner units creates fear and uncertainty. Without clear command and control, the risk of unpredictable actions increases. This further destabilizes already fragile regions, compounding humanitarian and security challenges. Looking ahead, several scenarios are possible. In the short term, Russia may attempt to re-establish logistical routes and stabilize Wagner's operations. This could involve increased military presence, new agreements with regional partners, or alternative supply mechanisms. However, these efforts will take time and may not fully restore previous capabilities. In the medium term, Wagner's structure may be fundamentally reconfigured. Units could be integrated more directly into official Russian military frameworks or replaced with new private entities. This would represent a significant shift in how Russia conducts operations abroad. In the long term, the current crisis could mark the beginning of the end for Wagner as a dominant force in Africa. If the network cannot recover, its influence will diminish, opening the door for new actors and new dynamics. But perhaps the most critical question remains unanswered. Was this collapse the result of external pressure alone, or did internal weaknesses make it inevitable? And if such a network can unravel so quickly, what does that say about the stability of similar operations elsewhere? The catastrophic disruption that has hit Wagner's 150,000 troops is more than a logistical failure. It is a structural shock that exposes the vulnerabilities of modern hybrid warfare. It shows how interconnected systems, when disrupted at key Nakat, can collapse with surprising speed. What we are witnessing is not just a temporary setback. It is a moment that could redefine the role of private military forces in global conflict. And as events continue to unfold, the consequences will extend far beyond Africa. Share your thoughts on this situation in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and like this video. Thank you for choosing us.